Hello and welcome to the Musical Instrument Investigator. Today on the website of French auction portal Intershare, and we're going to have a look at an auction by Millon Auctioneers, also formerly known as Apoleum, and they have this auction of musical instruments and other music related items coming up. There's 385 lots in this auction, and the auction is finishing on the 23rd of April. It's the 13th today, so a good while left to go. I'll put a link in the description as always. Looks like the buyer's premium is 25%, so that's what you pay on top of the final hammer price. Bear in mind this is a French auction, so import, export fees, shipping, CITES restrictions if you're looking to bid outside of France. So without further ado, we'll just crack on and see what we've got. Just to say, if you do enjoy these videos, please consider liking, subscribing, turning on notifications, etc., because it really does help. So first of all, we've got a whole load of really interesting gramophones, a little bit out of our musical instrument remit. However, it is quite a wonderful collection, to be fair. So if you're into gramophones, I would definitely recommend checking out this auction because it's some really ridiculous stuff. At least a couple of pages or 1.5 pages of really interesting gramophones. So definitely be sure to have a look at that. But we are here about musical instruments, so we are going to look at musical instruments. So we've got a 3/4 Mircore violin there, with a Nicholas Bertolini label there, 100 to 120 euros, seems in fairly good condition. Another 3/4 violin there in the style of Grandjean, needs a bit of work, 300 to 400 euro there, seems maybe a little bit pricey. 3/4 Medifino here, 40 to 60, not too bad either. Another 3/4, there's quite a lot of 3/4s here, late 19th century. Nothing crazy so far. Half size Mircore violin there, JTL, quite a low tier thing. Another 3/4 Mansuy one there. Another 3/4, once again nothing too crazy. Same here, so we're seeing a lot of 3/4 violins. Hopefully we'll see some full size ones soon. It really is quite an amazing amount of 3/4 violins here, or Medifino stuff, which is the one of the very low tier of French violins. Yeah, I don't think I've ever seen so many French 3/4 violins in one place. Some of these can be pretty good. It's quite a nice back on that one, and if you've got, there'll always be children wanting to learn the violin, so these are probably good for a shop or something wanting to stock up on such things. Well, that's a really beautiful back actually. It's quite nice, 40 to 50. Nice scroll as well. Just more kind of generic stuff, half size there, nothing too crazy. Still on the fractional instruments here, half size with JL Mast, 250 to 300 there, slightly better level. Another half size Mircore, nothing too crazy there. Half size Mircore. And a small quarter size 19th century French violin bearing a Medifino label, 100 to 200. Looks quite nice actually. Looks like it's got a sound post crack on the back, which is unfortunate, but actually was looking fairly nice. That seems way too high with the sound post crack in the back. Some art bits and some books that we won't get into on this occasion, but some good, really nice fine books there. L'Archet, all of this stuff here, French bow makers. So it looks like there's some pretty good books here in this auction, but we will not cover that for now. Looks like we're on full size instruments now. A German violin, pretty standard. French miracle violin, also another standard thing. More miracle stuff. Once again, nothing too crazy here. Central European violin, 20th century. Fairly standard. Another miracle violin. Painted figure flames on the back and also on the scroll. So interesting model though. The JTL violin there, 400 to 500 on that. Seems to be roughly the price that these things go for. German violin, 40 to 60. Steiner stamped on the back, just another generic workshop instrument. French violin, 20th century's got had a bit of a hard life there. The French miracle violin made by Cousineau. It's not fairly standard, needs a bit of repair. Another miracle violin here. And French violin made by Leon Mougenot, 800 to 1200 there. Fairly nice back on that. Needs a little bit of work there. Another miracle violin with this Nicholas Bertolini label. That could be okay when it's sorted. It's got some varnish issues. French violin, 20th century. Nice back on that actually. Let's have a quick look at the thing. Yeah, it's not too bad. Interesting F-holes. 400 to 500. 359 length of back. Interesting enough. French miracle violin made in the H. Clotel model. Interesting purfling, so close to the edge there. Kind of slightly odd. 3 to 400. Another French violin there. Just fairly standard stuff. French violin, Marc Lebert, 1200 to 1500 there. Quite nice back on it. Looks like these pictures are quite oversaturated, but I can believe that this is probably quite a nice violin in better pictures. French violin made by Bailly, Charles Bailly, 2 to 3000 on that, 360. Usually pretty good violins, quite popular. Another miracle violin, an Amati label. Right, German violin here, Lionhead. Fairly standard trade instrument, but slightly nicer lion than some of the lower tier ones. Another miracle violin here. French miracle violin there. Another JTL French violin. French miracle violin with a Lupo label. Another miracle violin. Anonymous French violin, 19th century. 150 to 200 on that. German violin with a label, Werkstatt Rouge, 1500 to 2000. They're quite interesting detail here. It's really quite pretty. Quite like that, and it's got flat back, a bit like a kind of Testore family instrument. But yeah, 360mm length of back. Looks like quite a nicely made instrument that. So that's quite an interesting one. Nice scroll as well, nicely cut scroll. So yeah, 1500 to 2000 euros. Quite a nice looking instrument there. Another miracle violin there, 500 to 700. Central European violin, 2-piece, 50 to 200. French violin made by Georges Apparout, 1000 to 1200 there. French violin by JTL. Musical violin there. 100 to 200, all fairly similar. French violin by Joseph Aubrey, 1500 to 2000. It's quite striking back there. Joseph Aubrey Le Havre, 1500 to 2000, slightly nicer looking thing. German violin by August Friedrich Meissel, 1000 to 1200. Really not a fan of that choice of wood or varnish. It's not particularly nice. French miracle violin here, very standard. 19th century German violin, the Steiner stamp on the back, typical kind of 19th century thing. The French violin, pretty low tier kind of one. And some more violins. Another French violin there, pretty standard. 19th century miracle violin, nothing too crazy. Another French miracle violin there. These are all just fairly standard things. Another of the same type. 20th century violin with a Barbet and Grenier label, but looks fairly standard. 19th century violin with a Prof. Luigi Parata label, interesting, just looks very much standard. 20th century German violin here, it's again not super exciting. 20th century French, that's quite nice. Kind of bird's eye maple on that, and a kind of Guarneri model. So yeah, that's slightly nicer. 3 to 400. I don't think that's all too bad. 355 length of back. I think that's okay. It's nothing super fantastic, but not too bad. French miracle violin, more of the same. French miracle violin there. G Santorino label, 2 to 300. Once again, this kind of Guarneri-ish model. 20th century French violin with a Luthier d'Art stamp. That's like a fairly nice looking instrument there. 5 to 7. French miracle violin, Chapeau Viome label, fairly standard there. 19th century French violin. Yeah, that's fairly nice. Bit long though, 365. French violin probably made by Justin Derazy, 500 to 700 euros on that. Nice back. Definitely needs a bit of TLC though. Made in a copy of Carlo Bergonzi. Okay. Colin Mazar, they seem to be really popular at the moment. 2 to 3,000. Looks fairly standard. It has a certificate as well, actually. French violin, label Paul Boucher. French violin by Nicolas Morlaw, 3 to 400. That's quite nice, actually. Doesn't say how long the back is, but I quite like this figure on the back, this kind of flame going into, like, kind of slightly bending round. I quite like that. Yeah, interesting model. I like this turn on the scroll. That's quite worm marks. It's had some worm, which is unfortunate. I quite like that. That's not too bad. Another Miracle violin here. It's all fairly similar. French Miracle violin with Emile Blondelet label there. 1,000 to 200. Another French one here, just the same old. Nothing too crazy there. French glass violin, okay. Right, French Remy violin. Okay, wow, interesting. Crazy lion head. I very briefly owned a violin similar to this with one of those lion heads, and I didn't own it for long. Not the greatest of things, but they are quite curious. The JTL violin here. The French violin there. Not too bad. This is quite nice. French violin made by Paul Bailly. Magini copy 28-3. Really nice actually. Like kind of similar in a way to some of the Viome Magini ones like this. Very similar, and you're going to save a lot of money from rather than 50,000-60,000 euros, you can just get one for probably 3 or 4. Quite like that. And 360, it's not huge either. So yeah, this is quite nice actually. Yeah, don't mind that. Actually, surprisingly, it's quite good. French violin, early 19th century, with a Didier Nicolas Ain, 800 to 1200 there. It looks fairly typical of that kind of thing. I quite like those. The Miracle violin here, fairly standard. 19th century French violin. Yeah, cool, like large eye on that. Quite like the scroll. Obviously needs a lot of TLC, but I like that. 3 to 400. It's pretty long, 365, but yeah, it's got charm. I quite like that. French violin Breton, just fairly standard. Just looking for something a bit more interesting. French violin there, standard. Another fairly standard French violin. Medafino, this is the low tier of French violins. 19th century French violin here, 80 to 120. So it needs a bit of work. And where were we? Here, I think. Yeah, just more of the same really. French violin made by German Trumpf. Okay, interesting. 3.5. Germain Trumpf. I was getting confused there. 3.5 to 4,000. Yeah, quite nice model. 354. Made in Strasbourg. A nice scroll on that. Yeah, interesting looking violin. Another Miracle violin. Same again. Another JTL violin here. 100 to 120. Okay. Right, Miracle violin again, 20th century, 150 to 200. Some of these I think are kind of okay. Interesting looking button there. Another Miracle violin. It's unfortunate the French auctions are just really quite repetitive and generic in what they sell. I mean, it makes sense that a French auction will have lots of French violins, but it doesn't make it any less boring. And that is just what seems to be at these auctions. But I mean, French violins are popular at the moment, and if you want to buy a cheap French violin, you can definitely get one from an auction. Miracle violin, 19th century. These auctions, Millon and Vichy in particular, absolutely flooded with these French violins. And there are some really amazing French violins out there, and then there's lots of stuff which are the same. Some of the lower ones can be very good instruments and sound really nice, but they're just not really too exciting, unfortunately. French violin made in the workshop of Leo Cyr, 300 to 400. Interesting wood choice on that. Something like this I find a bit more interesting. Curious scroll there. Yeah, this is a bit more something that I'd be interesting. These really massive corners there, 300 to 400 euros. So that's a curious one. French Mircore violin, standard. Ooh. Another one here with a kind of double purfling there. More of the same. Another Mircore violin here. Unfortunately, it's just endless of the same thing. More JTLs. Slightly different model this. Looks like this centre seam's been opened before, so looks a bit nasty. You'd have to spend a fair bit of money getting that sorted. Another Leo Sear one. Yeah, these are really interesting, these Leo Sear ones. This kind of choice of wood and stuff. This one's had an unfortunate brick repair, but yeah, these are kind of interesting. I need to look into those a bit more. They're a bit more curious. Another generic one there. French violin, late 19th century. That's a bit more interesting. Curious model type there. Mircore violin there. And another Mircore violin there with a Leon Bernardel label. Quite nice wood on that one, 800 to 1200. French Mircore violin with an H. Dennis label. Mircore violin, 19th century. Interesting, quite cool F-holes on that. Double purfling, kind of Magini style. Another Mircore violin, 20th century. It's just all the same kind of stuff. Right, it's an 18th century German violin without a label. 500 to 700. 20th century German violin. Another German violin here. Schuster and Co. German violin without a label. Okay, another German violin here, labelled George Hornsteiner. These are all fairly standard things as well. 19th century German violin. This is like a different kind of trade that we're getting now. So you see lots of this kind of fake dark antiquing on those German instruments. So 20th century German violin there. So it seems they've lumped in all these German violins together here. German violin, 19th century without label. That's a little bit horrid. 19th century German violin, Mark Kirkin. Once again, not the greatest of stuff here. German violin labelled Matteo Albani. Okay. German violin attributed to Leopold Widam, bearing the label Leopold Widam. Okay, 2 to 3. Yeah, it's quite a nice looking violin, whatever it may be. Another violin here. Another German violin there. So we've got all of the German generic stuff now. 19th century. Okay. Yeah, once again we're just seeing different examples of trade violins here. Don't think there's anything particularly interesting about that. And let's see what else we got here. Anonymous violin. Yeah, it's pretty generic. Violin from Central Europe, 19th century. Yeah, interesting outline and F holes on that one. Central European violin, early 19th century. 5 to 600. Yeah, it's kind of, yeah, interesting work. It's had a lot of funny bits done to it, but I think it's kind of curious looking. Has some charm. Another Central European violin. Interesting figure to the back of that one. Another 20th century violin there. And more kind of generic stuff there. 19th century violin, that's really screwed up. Another 20th century. I mean, most of the stuff in this auction is unfortunately extremely generic. 20th century violin with an ornati label. Right, we're on to some other instruments here now. Sanyo flute, Millon and Yamaha, nothing too crazy there. Noblet and Yamaha and a Lebret flute there. And Trevor James transverse flute head there, a silver head, so 800 to 1200 on that. Lewis Lott transverse flute there, silver metal and silver mouthpiece. Claude Laurent transverse flute there. Let's have a quick look at this. Paris 1828. Yeah, interesting, very interesting looking flute there in glass. Wow, interesting. Yeah, I was looking here and thinking that looks a bit weird, but now you see the pictures here. Yeah, okay, wow, a glass flute, really interesting. 1500 to 2000, so that's quite curious. Another Lewis Lott. There's some quite nice flutes here. And we've got a Bonneville transverse flute there. Oh wow, it's got like a little piccolo included in the case. That's really sweet. Oh, that's quite nice. That's a nice presentation box. 1500 to 2000 there. And a Suga there. Mass Packer. Transverse flute set. Oh, that's interesting. A lot of flutes. Bone recorder and transverse flutes. That's interesting looking. 40 to 60 on that. See what else we got here. Selmer piccolo flute. Adjustment tool for flute tenons. Alright, we've got some other instruments now. We've got a German viola. 600 to 800. Looks alright, not too bad. 403 mil, that's okay. French viola made by Bernard Lefebvre. 800 to 1200. Looks nice, yeah, looks quite nicely made. 412 length of back, 800 to 1200. That's pretty good, nice looking instrument. Half size 20th century cello. Interesting F holes on that. Once again, Werkstatt Rook. We saw the instrument with that same label earlier. Miracle 3/4 there. French miracle cello with a label Le Fille de la J. Tournier. Okay. 20th century French cello with a Bertolini label there. 20th century cello there. JTL. Miracle quarter size French cello made by Cabasa. Okay, 1000 to 1200. That's an interesting cello. This looks kind of familiar. I almost wonder if this was in a Polium before, but yeah, quite nice. Needs a bit of work, but quite like that. That's quite nice. Some more these symphonians, polyphons, these kind of interesting instruments here. 3/4 bow there, Mircore stuff. If there's anything super interesting, we'll stop. A lot of Mircore bows here, as you'd expect. So lots of Mircore stuff. That's kind of interesting looking. 19th century French bows. Round stick in exotic wood. Yeah, curious wood grain on the head there. More Mircore stuff here. Violin bow in the Bargenet style. Violin bow probably made by Cuneo Huri. Interesting. More Mircore stuff. Some of these are probably pretty good, to be fair. More Mircore stuff. Marc Lebert. See if there's anything super interesting here. Mircore violin bow probably made at the JTL. That's the Viome model with this rounded frog here. Looks like it's had some pin repairs. Could just be marks, but that is a little bit odd looking, to be honest. Let's see what else we've got here. Violin bow bearing a mark Dolphy, Brussels. Interesting. And let's see what's going on here. 20th century violin bow with a Thibault iron mark. Yeah, interesting looking bow as well. Violin bow anonymous. Round stick. Yeah, some good potential bows. That's what I'm finding in a lot of these auctions recently, is that violins are really quite dull, but there's some potential bows here. 1500 to 2000 there. Violin bow by Louis Morazon. A few more better bows here. Viola bow there, made by Morazon. Yeah, looks like quite a nice bow. It's had a bit of a hard life, needs a bit of TLC. See what else we got here. Cello bows there. Okay. Double bass bow with a mark of Millon. Okay. Landwehr. They're like current makers, bow makers, 3 to 400. Do a lot of early music bows as well. Double bass there. Flat bottom. Wow, that's seen a bit of a hard life. Missing a load of stuff. That's a real project. 3 to 400 on that. Lots of instruments. Mircore. Okay. So nothing new then. It's the same as pretty much the rest of this entire auction has been. A load of Mircore stuff. Once again, you could have just probably put everything in the auction in one lot of the violins, and that would have been enough. And that's kind of some curious, almost amateur made stuff. Well, 80 to 120, it's not too bad. A whole load of bows there in a lot as well. Yeah, loads of bows here. There's a Celtic harp there from Fukui, Japan. Interesting. 150 to 200 there. What else we got here? Popular Art Luth, cylindrical body. Okay, that's pretty interesting. 40 to 60. I don't think I've seen anything like that before. That's really quite curious. Some zithers here. Different kinds. There's a moon guitar and a kind of African harp there. It's kind of interesting. Guitar and mandolin. Okay, mandolin. Here's like a kind of epinette de Vosges kind of thing. And yeah, a little mini kind of ukulele guitar type thing. That's quite cute. That actually might be quite interesting, this instrument. 80 to 120 on that. Whole load of other mandolins. I think these are quite generic. Don't think there's anything too much to see here. Viols d'Aline. Okay, 2 instruments there, kind of curious. Right, really nice Neapolitan mandolin here. Johannes Vernaccio with a label Johannes Vernaccio 300-400, needs a massive amount of restoration, but probably a beautiful instrument in its time with this kind of interesting vaulted back as well. One of these Swedish lute harp, kind of lute guitar things. Sarangi there, mouth organ thing from China. Interesting kind of bronze instrument there. Hurdy-gurdy of some kind. Nice case actually. Some ceremonial drums, some of the harp type instruments. Koto there, Suzuki classical guitar, Ovation, Sigma, all fairly standard. These kind of classicals, and I think this is quite nice actually. Romantic guitar, 19th century, 300-400. That's not too bad. Only got a couple of pages left here. Children's guitar there. Maybe called jazz guitar. And these Line 6 guitars, I always thought these actually were quite nice. Made in Japan by Fujigen. Yeah, I just thought these were quite attractive in a way, those Line 6 guitars there. Fender Strat there. Model 60. Made in Mexico. Gibson HD6X Pro. Is this one with the robot tuners or no? That's the one with normal tuners. 800 to 1200. Vigier, that's a good make of guitars, French make. Miyazi, okay, interesting. Curious old kind of 60s, 70s types of guitars. Samek there. Crown Durango 12-string guitar. That's kind of cool in a quirky way. Electric guitar, Ibanez. Zero set, Suzuki, Balalaika there. Lyrist alto saxophone there. A sousaphone, or a sarrusophone. Guatro Mark. 5 to 700 on that. Galbert clarinet. Lecomte clarinets, one in boxwood. Rosewood, interesting, yeah. Rosewood one here and a boxwood one there. Artcraft clarinet in grenadine or grenadier. Buffet crampon clarinets there. Some other wind instruments. Yeah, some kind of like flageolet or something. Yeah, flageolet. Oboe in grenadier. Transverse flute in bone. Okay, interesting. Cornet, 3-piston. Little trumpet things there. Dornet saxophone. Little harmonium there, that's quite cute. Little accordion. Children's piano, that's quite sweet. And some other foot pedals, guitar amp related things. One of these Line 6 loopers. Some records and stuff. And then, yeah, a stool. So there we have it. That is the Millon or Apollyon auction of musical instruments and other bits. Amazing gramophones there. If you like gramophones, definitely check it out. A few interesting instruments here and there. Mainly bows, probably the most interesting thing. Otherwise, a lot of generic instruments, unfortunately. But yeah, definitely worth having a look at and take your time if you're interested in French instruments, and definitely a lot of opportunity there. So yeah, thanks a lot for watching. Really appreciate it, and I'll catch you next time. Bye.